Okay, so the next question in the practice test was asking you to simplify 78 over 80. Now let's apply the rule that we mentioned earlier, which was to find the numerator and the denominator in the same row or the same column. So when I try and do that, I can see that there's a number 78 over here. There's also a number 78 over here. Now, these actually mean the same thing. For example, 6 times 13 is 78. 6 times 13 is 78. So it doesn't matter whether you read down or across, they mean the same thing. So just to make sure that we don't get confused, we only need to circle 1 because again, it means the same thing. So let's get rid of that and we'll just circle one of them. So we've got 78. Now, if you look at the multiples of 6, we can't find the number 80. Remember, we need the numerator and the denominator in the same row or the same column. Now, if we try and use the number 6 in this, it won't work because although 78 divided by 6 is 13, which is a whole number, it's an equal number. The problem is 80 divided by 6 doesn't equal an equal number, because if you look at the multiples of 6 here, you can see that 6 goes into 78 13 times and 6 goes into 84 14 times equally, but it won't go into 80 equally because the multiples of 6 don't have the number 80 in there. So it's impossible for the number 6 to go into the number 80 equally. So we can't use the number 6. So let's try to find the number 80. So we can see that there's a number 80 here, but we have the same problem because we need to find the numerator and the denominator in the same row or the same column. Now, if you look at this, we know that 80 divided by 8 is 10, so we can write that. Oops, sorry. So 80 divided by 8 is 10. 80 divided by 8 is 10. But if you try it for 78, it won't work. Because if you look at the multiples of 8, you cannot find the number 78 in there. So 8 goes into 72 9 times, and 8 goes into 80 10 times, but there's no 78 in there. So definitely 8 cannot go into 78 equally. So that won't work either. So what do we need to do? Well, if you look at your times tables here, we know that it only goes up to the number 25. So 25 by 25. Now, remember in class, I said to you that if the numerator and the denominator ends with an even number, then definitely 100% the number 2 will go into both numbers. So again, if the end numbers are even, number 2 will go into it equally. So now we just need to work out what is the answer for 78 divided by 2. Well, let's do some division. So we have to ask the question first is, how many times does 2 go into the number 7 equally? Well, if we look at the multiples of 2, we can see that there is no number 7 in there. So 2 cannot go into the number 7 equally. But how many times can the number 2 go into the number 7 equally, if we were to ask the question? Now, if you look at the multiples of 2, you can see that 2 times 3 is 6, or 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 2 goes into 6 3 times equally. 6 is the closest number to 7 without it going over. So I can say that 2 goes into the number 7 equally 3 times. So I'll write the number 3 here. But remember, 2 goes into 6 equally 3 times. But this is the number 7. So there's 1 left over. So there's 1 remainder. So then that remainder that's left over, we put it next to the other number, which is there. So now this number 8 turns into an 18 because there's a number 1 in front of it. So now we have to ask the question, how many times does 2 go into the number 18? And if we look at the multiples of 2, we can see that there's an 18 here. And we know that the times tables is also a division table, so we can ask, or we can find out that the number 18 divided by 2 equals 9. So actually 2 does go into 18 equally. 2 goes into 18 equally 9 times. Now, because it goes into the number 18 equally 9 times, there's no remainder left, which means that 78 divided by 2 is 39. So going back to the fraction, we can say that 78 divided by 2 equals 39. What about 80? Because remember, we have to find one number that goes into the numerator and the denominator equally. Now that one number is the number 2, so we do the same thing to the bottom. So 80 divided by 2, and again, let's try and use division here. So we ask the question, how many times does 2 go into the number 8? Well, let's have a look at the multiples of 2. We look at the multiples of 2, and we can see that there's a number 8 there. There it is right there. So now we know that 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 2 goes into 8 4 times. So now we can write the number 4 here. And because there's no remainder, then we just put a 0. So 80 divided by 2 is 40. So now we can just write here 40. Now the question is, are we able to simplify this fraction anymore? And the answer is no. We can't simplify this anymore, so we leave it as that. So the correct answer to that question is 39 over 40.